Good afternoon, everybody. I'm excited to have an opportunity to share some insights about what's ahead this year in 2024 with respect to managing the EV marketplace and your inventory. I think, like everything in our business, there are risks and opportunities, and I'd like to think that some of the content that I'm going to share with you today is going to give you an opportunity to take advantage of those opportunities as we move ahead and mitigate whatever risk could potentially be associated with the EV marketplace. So with that said, I think we'll go ahead and get started. I think maybe to kick things off, we'll talk a little bit about the state of the union with EVs this year. And as I think about 2024, what really sticks out to me is the word more. When I say more, I think it means more of a lot of things. I think number one, there's more press about the EV marketplace every day. I can't kind of go around the corner without having some client that I've talked to talking to me about questions that they have, press, good and bad, favorable and unfavorable about what's going on in the EV marketplace. But in addition to those aspects, when I think of 2024, what I think about is more inventory. What I think about is more opportunity. What I think about is more models that are going to be available in the marketplace, both on the new car side and on the used car side. And I think more questions from the audience, the consumers. People are, interested in EVs, and I think that bears truth when you see that. As an example, I just read yesterday, searches on cars.com year to date in the used EV market are up 29%. So what that says is that there's a fair amount of interest in the marketplace with EVs, but with that interest, there are also some concerns and questions that come up with respect to, how does owning an EV work? Where am I going to charge it? How am I going to charge it? How much is it going to cost me to buy an EV? And what are some of the opportunities that I might have on the consumer side to take advantage of the marketplace as it evolves? I think that what we all know is this: it's going to be more change. And managing through that change is a really important aspect of being successful coming out on the other side of things. So, how can you get prepared? I think there's really three main things that I would ask every client to consider. One is, who's the audience? What's my buyer look like? And I want to talk to you guys about some of the techniques and strategies that you can do to really zero in on who that buyer is, how they differ from the traditional car buyer, and how you can, connect with them in a meaningful way to, kind of get them excited about doing business with you. Two is really kind of coaching you through how you can identify where the demand is, right down to the zip code of where these people are that are in the game, that are actively searching for an EV. And you can, again, connect with them, give them an opportunity to learn more about you and get yourself into a position to sell those people. And then lastly, how you can leverage AI and machine learning to really understand down to the VIN level where the opportunities and challenges are going to be in your market with every single car that you're talking about being involved with. So to get started, I think it's important to understand, how to really identify who this EV shopper is. So there's a lot of moving parts to identifying the demographics of these people. And I think it's a critical aspect of successfully marketing to and connecting with those people. Who's an EV buyer? Well, I think like a lot of products, the evolution of who that buyer is, it's ever changing. The first thing I would say is, like a lot of products, there's an adoption curve. And initially, with most products, including EVs, the first tranche of people that are going to get excited about doing business with that product are what I like to think of as innovators. These are people that are adventurous. They're not going to be afraid to take big risks and try something different and new. And I feel like at this point with the EV market, we're really actually beyond that first tranche, the innovators, and we're now into what I would describe as early adopters. These are people who kind of like gadgets. They're people that will put up with some inconveniences to get something new and cutting edge. And we've already seen that with EVs. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about the infrastructure from a charging standpoint and the ability that people have to, kind of compensate for what a lot of people call range anxiety. I think these early adopters are generally people that are going to be okay with maybe some inconveniences, because they're really excited about having something new and different, or maybe they're very concerned with the environment, or they generally believe that the future is going to come at some point along the way. And so they might as well kind of get in there as quick as they can and have a step up or a leg up on everybody else in the game. But then I think once we get beyond the innovator and the early adopter, then we want to think about that mainstream customer. And I read a study earlier this week about the expectations of these mainstream customers. Generally speaking, I think once we move from the early adopter phase into the mainstream, the expectations of the consumer are going to change pretty rapidly. So the study that Boston Consulting Group did, that was referred to in an automotive news article, said that everybody is interested in an EV, but what they want is a 20-minute charging time, a 350-mile range, and a 50K or below price point. There's only one car, happens to be a Hyundai, that fits that profile at this point. So as we accelerate into the mainstream, I think that we're going to have to consider what's going to be different about marketing to an early innovator, an early adopter, and how we're going to market to somebody that's more of a mainstream customer. And I would encourage you as a dealership to kind of think through how you could get a little more knowledge about who these people are, right down to interviewing people that are, current EV owners, to get a little sense of what got them excited about it, what their expectations are, versus somebody that's got the EV in consideration, but really hasn't taken the step to actually, live with one. One of the things that a dealer recently shared with me that I thought was very interesting was they actually had a couple EVs, and they, implemented some marketing techniques to get people that weren't considering an EV to come in and actually drive one and get to know it a little bit. And they learned a lot through that experience, really understanding, how the mainstream buyer thinks about the EV market a little differently than those innovators or early adopters. Okay, so now what we want to talk about is how the consumer demand is potentially going to be different in the EV market than it would be for the mainstream ICE kind of a customer. First things first, you got to be able to have access to technology that allows you to identify where that demand is. So there's a lot of different things that you can do. By the way, I work for a company called Lotlinx, and we provide this sort of technology to be able to zero in on, where consumer demand for any kind of vehicle is. And we can talk more about that here at the end. But I believe all in all, the number one thing that you're going to have to consider is that the likelihood is to achieve the level of demand that you're going to want to move these cars in a timely manner. It's probably going to potentially require you to consider other markets that could be adjacent or disconnected from where you actually are physically located. You can see over here on the right-hand side, there are some specific geographies where the adoption is way better than others. One of the things that I believe, those top 10 adoptions have in play is that most of those, not all, but some for sure, are states where there's an additional state tax credit in addition to the federal tax credits. And, I think that, obviously the legislature, kind of pushing the adoption of these things makes for a little bit, more pliable marketplace. There are 7 states currently that offer state tax incentives or state tax credits: Colorado, Maine, Massachusetts, Maryland, Delaware, New York, and California. And as you can see here on my slide, a handful of those are the top 10 adopters. I think with the bottom 10 adoption states, they all have either something in common with just the general population or the population of charging. opportunities for a consumer, or they're in more rural markets where, undoubtedly it could be a little more challenging. That's why it's so important in my mind, if you're going to take the opportunity to get more involved with the EV market, to really know and understand where that demand is. And once you figure out where it potentially is, how to connect with the people in those marketplaces. I think it's absolutely essential when you think about differentiating yourself from the people that you're trying to compete with in your physical location, to have a leg up on really having the knowledge and understanding you're going to need. The other thing that I would tell you is, it's essential, when you're thinking about the persona of the person that you're talking about, identifying where the demand is, to have, really sophisticated knowledge about the incentives that are available and the different models that you might be competing with, to connect with these people. Okay, so once you know and understand a little bit about the persona of the customer, once you know and understand where the potential opportunities are from a marketplace standpoint to connect with more of those buyers, what do you need to know about the EV itself? Well, there's no shortage to the knowledge and understanding that I believe you're going to have to be successful. But I also want to reiterate that in a lot of ways, while your knowledge of the market is going to be essential in the EV market, it's really no different than being knowledgeable about what you're doing with the regular mainstream inventory. So what are you going to have to know? You're certainly going to have to know supply and demand. You're going to have to know pricing and incentives. You're going to have to know things like the state and the federal tax credits that are available. Not any shortage of information that's available to you. You can get on fueleconomy.gov and zero in on, what incentives are available at the federal and the state level. But you're going to have to know really insightfully, what the competition in those other geographies are offering, and make sure that whenever you're advertising these cars and marketing these cars, you're connecting that persona, the person that you want to really, market to, with the right kind of messaging that's going to put you in a good position to be able to, you know, get somebody to call you or, come in. So I think it's essential that, you understand the supply and demand of these cars. I think it's essential that you understand the competitiveness of the pricing along with the incentives that are available, and ensure that when you deliver that message, you're going to deliver the right message at the right moment in time. And with respect to the used marketplace, there are a lot of moving parts. I think that we've seen over the course of the last 6 or 8 months that supply can really impact things. A lot of people on this call likely saw Hertz decided to kind of throw in the towel on some of the EV inventory that they had, and they rapidly introduced a pretty significant amount of inventory into the wholesale environment. I think we also have probably, if you're paying attention, seen that pricing, specifically with the Tesla brand, has affected the used vehicle pricing in a rapid way. Once they reduce price on the new car side, pricing can, really be affected on the used car side. And I think now we're seeing more of the traditional OEMs, making some moves based on supply and demand on the new car side that are also likely going to affect the market on the used car side. So I feel like, leveraging whatever data and information that you have in your inventory management software solution to make sure that you're staying on top with the movement of cars in the demand side as well as the supply side, and ensuring that you've got the right price at the right time with every car that you have on the used car side, is going to be a really critical element of making sure that you're delivering the right message. So why does marketing to each specific VIN matter? Well, there's a litany of reasons that I could go through that I would argue are going to be important. But I think what's really critical is to understand that the reality of marketing in today's world is more about quality than quantity. I think the days of just, shotgunning a bunch of ads out there into the marketplace and, anticipating that, the right person is going to connect with that ad at the right moment in time is sort of behind us. And I think what's critical about VIN-specific advertising, especially when we think about something like the EV market, is connecting with the right person, but at the right moment in time. Most most cars that get a lot of attention in the online marketplace in the old world that we lived in happen to be cars that I think of as click candy. They're cars that, create a lot of interest, they get a lot of views, and sometimes deceive us into believing that, we're progressing towards actually connecting with the right person and making a sale, when in fact, they may just be cars that kind of go viral. And I think with VIN specific advertising, what you're able to do is, again, identify demand specific to the year, make, model, trim vehicle that you're talking about, and not just identify demand, but identify the behavior of the shopper in the marketplace, so that when we see somebody engage with the, shopping of that kind of car, we can also see the behavior of them in such a way that makes certain we connect your vehicle with them at that right moment in time. Again, I would argue that the EV persona, that shopper, is going to take a way different path than somebody that's looking at a traditional car. And I think that potentially the funnel is going to be a longer funnel. In other words, I think the initial research is going to be a lot broader than it would be with a traditional kind of car. And the time that it takes to go from that broad search to that zero moment of truth, as we all know, is going to be a little different. It's not just identifying that there are shoppers in the market, it's identifying that they're behaving in a way that suggests that they're ready to pull the trigger on a car. And that's really when we want to get in front of them. Now, as I mentioned before, Lotlinx, the company that I work with, that works with all the dealers across the country that have recognized the importance of what I just talked about, we can provide you a free proprietary VinView optimizer report to show you how your current marketing strategy is working, not just on EVs, but all the rest of your market. You can email marketing@lotlinx.com to request a free report. All we need is an inventory feed and access to your Google Analytics, and we can identify, specific to EVs or again, any of the rest of the inventory that you have, how your current marketing strategy is doing with connecting you with those people. And I would highly encourage you that you would do that. So what have we talked about? What have we learned today? I think, as I said before, the EV market is not without any shortage of a lot of opportunities and a lot of risk. Ensuring that you are taking the right approach is going to be critical to succeeding, whether you're talking about your new EV inventory or the opportunity that you might have in the used marketplace. Understanding the customer that you're dealing with and how they're going to go through that path and process to zero in on the right kind of car is going to be critical. And I think that, again, leveraging your current client base, really learning and understanding some of the questions that these people potentially are going to have, or concerns that they would have that would move them away from consideration, is a critical element of what you're doing. And then obviously leveraging the right kind of technology to being able to take advantage of that is going to be huge. I guess what I'd like to leave you with is this: EV sales, in spite of what you might hear in the press, accelerated over 50% last year. That's a big jump. Again, it started with a small number, but I can't think of anything in my career, in the retail automotive space, that I remember jumping that level that quickly. Now, as we move ahead, they anticipate that somewhere around a quarter of all the sales this year are going to be either pure EVs, plug-in hybrids, or hybrids of some kind. So what that tells me is that the consumer has a level of expectation about fuel economy and, advancing into new technologies that's probably going to need to be quenched. Our job as retailers is to really ensure that we take advantage of those opportunities. And again, I think the market is going to continue to grow. I think there are going to be some starts, there are going to be some stops, there are going to be some challenges along the way. But like any challenge that we face, especially as retailers in the automotive space, I believe that knowledge is really going to be power. Ignorance or a lack of clarity on different things that come into play as we go along and we advance forward are the things that are going to hold us back and put us in a position where we're going to have greater risk. Really being insightful and making sure that we have the right strategy at the right moment in time is what's going to help us be successful. And again, we would love the opportunity. Anybody's got any interest in learning more about how to identify that demand in the marketplace, understand more about the risks and opportunities that come into play. We're happy to reach out and help. Nick, that's all I've got.
Again, the voice and the great presentation has been shared by Fabian Macken, who is the Senior Vice President and Chief Customer Officer at Lotlinx. For our webinar today, the 2024 Ultimate Guide to Effectively Manage Your EV Inventory, and outstanding presentation. Just a reminder that we are recording today's session, so please keep watch of your inbox for a message containing a link to the recording of our webinar today, so you can review the great information and suggestions that Fabian has shared, as well as distributed around your store and to your colleagues to review later. And if you have questions for Fabian Macken, please use the chat function here on the Zoom platform. And one question that's already come in, Fabian, and it goes to that customer research component that you highlighted throughout your presentation, either through Lotlinx research or anecdotes you've had with gathering from clients or dealer friends or whomever. Just how have you seen the adoption of EVs related to the range component, that perhaps it's higher in a more urban setting where there's heavier traffic and that sort of thing, versus that open road component where maybe you want to open up a sports car and weave through traffic. How have you seen the adoption happening based on the concentration of population and traffic and such?
Yeah, I would say there's no question, at least at the point where we are right now in the EV marketplace journey, that urban shoppers or buyers are probably far more open to the idea of an EV than somebody out in a more rural marketplace, just because of the infrastructure. But I believe that, when you look at the landscape across the country and just the evolution of things, the infrastructure thing is well on its way to being resolved. And at the same time, more and more models are seeing an increasing amount of range. I think what's critical to understand with your buyer is what are their specific needs on a daily basis. Again, I live in Minneapolis, which, is a fairly big, metro area. But, I talk to a lot of people in my neighborhood. There's a couple of people that have EVs, and, there's not a lot of angst around the range here. I guess if I lived in, North Dakota, or I lived in, Southern Utah, it could be a completely different conversation for people in those markets. But what I would anticipate that we're going to begin to see is more and more infrastructure, more and more models having a superior range over the existing models that are available. That's going to evolve pretty rapidly.
Again, the voice and you're hearing for our webinar is our experts. Fabian Macken, who is the Senior Vice President and Chief Customer Officer at Lotlinx, for our session titled The 2024 Ultimate Guide to Effectively Manage Your EV Inventory. And in the closing moments that we have here, if you have a question for Fabian, please use the chat function here. And again, Fabian, hearkening back to what you referenced during your presentation about gathering those customer insights at the dealership, either via past purchasers or having some sort of public event, perhaps to give an EV a try. Just how insightful, from what you've heard, have those endeavors been? How surprising have the results been for dealerships? Not to be stereotypical or cliched, but perhaps know that someone who is interested in an F-250 with a lift kit versus someone who wants a Sienna minivan, that's two distinct constituencies. But EVs, maybe that's a more difficult customer to ascertain. Just what have you seen and heard about what dealers have been able to gather?
Well, I would say this. I think that, the dealers that I've talked to that have had those events or made an offer to get somebody to come in and get to know what's going on with an EV have been really struck by the curiosity of the general public. So while I think there potentially might not necessarily be as many mainstream buyers yet as we, would like there to be, there's a ton of curiosity out there. And I think connecting with people that have that curiosity, give them an opportunity to actually get in behind the wheel of a car, really understand some of the benefits that are, out there for somebody that owns an EV, and then to learn a little more about, maybe some of the infrastructure or some of the kind of concerns and questions that they might have about the daily utilization of an EV have been eye-opening to dealers. From what I've gathered in the conversations that I've had, once we've, had an opportunity to actually talk to some people and address some of the questions and concerns, the EV fits into play with a lot more shoppers than they think. And, again, I would anticipate that as we move ahead, that's going to continue to create a lot more curiosity and a lot more interest in the public.
Closing moments here on our webinar, the 2024 Ultimate Guide to Effectively Manage Your EV Inventory, featuring Fabian Macken, who is the Senior Vice President and Chief Customer Officer at Lotlinx. And Fabian, just to round out our conversation, just to reiterate, just how important is it for dealerships to wrap their arms around the EV market, since, as you referenced, the spectrum of offerings is growing, the adoption is gradually moving higher. Just how important is it to keep in mind that this is a segment of inventory that's going to become more and more important, perhaps, as we go down the road?
Yeah, Nick, I would just say this. I mean, the acceleration of sales and the curiosity out there in the marketplace from a consumer audience standpoint tell me that, if I'm not going to be an expert, I'm going to probably get left in the dust. Now, that said, I believe that knowledge is power, and, we've got to ensure that we have the right kind of thinking because, there are certainly no shortage of risks out there. Not understanding the marketplace and who that consumer is and how to connect with them in the right way puts you in a position where you could probably make some bad moves along the way. But again, like everything that we do that we're new and unfamiliar with, I think having the right kind of partnerships and, opportunities to learn from others is a key element of what needs to take place for me to be successful. Again, partnering with people that can provide you the insight and knowledge that you need in such a way that makes your job a little easier is a critical element of things. And, as I make a little pitch here at the end, I mean, we're absolutely working with dealers across the country, literally all day, every day, helping them gain that insight and knowledge and, achieving that sort of a partnership that can help you be successful.
That's Fabian Macken, Senior Vice President and Chief Customer Officer at Lotlinx. And you can connect with Fabian and the rest of the team at the company get started by going to their website at lotlinx.com. Fabian, thank you so much for the intriguing presentation and great recommendations for stores of all kinds. Thank you again.
You got it. Thanks much. Bye-bye.
And on behalf of all of us at Cherokee Media Group, we thank you so very much for joining us, and we look forward to having you again next time.